Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good morning. Thanks to those of you who are here with us in person and to all of you joining us online. Welcome. This is the Utility of Cities and Towns Board meeting. What is today? 15th?
15th.
Today is August 15th, 2022. My name is Dawn Ramsey. I'm serving this year as league president, and welcome all of you and appreciate your service on the board and to your communities. We're going to open up this morning. We have the minutes that have been sent out. Anybody had an opportunity to look through the minutes? And if so, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Or can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Shepherd. Second that. Second by Tony McKay. Any discussion of the minutes? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as they have been sent out, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Thank you. I feel absolutely naked with nothing in front of me. I don't think I've ever conducted a meeting with no paper and no pen in front of me, no nothing. I'm like, and I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I'm like, yeah, I feel really naked. Thank you for that. Like, I didn't bring my laptop in. I'll grab a pen because I'm like, I always just take my own little tedious notes about who makes what motion and where or whatever, and I'm like, it feels so weird.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like it makes me feel undressed. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Conflict of interest forms. Any new conflicts may have arisen in your lives. We'll just ask you to please send one of those in. And if that doesn't apply to you, then don't worry about it. And also a review of our, I don't have that in front of me, board meeting schedule for 22-23.
So can I jump in here?
Yeah, please.
We met with Mayor Silvestrini, who's excused today. He's on an airplane right now, so he couldn't even participate remotely. He's on a trip with some high school friends, but as he comes in as president in October, we went through and put together the draft schedule with him, recognizing that some board members go off in October, some will still continue. We just need a motion to adopt this as the tentative schedule, and then that way we can get it on calendars and get it moving for those who will still be on the board, and then we'll officially ratify it when we have the new board selected at the annual convention.
Okay, so do you need a motion to, or is this just?
This is just for information because it'll be the next board, but that's what the plan is to use these dates. So it's a chance for anybody to point out if there are any conflicts or issues with any of these dates. That way people who will still be on the board, we can get them scheduled, and then we'll officially ratify it when the new board takes office in October.
Okay.
Cam, I would just add that for folks who will continue on the board, you do not have a calendar invite out for November and December of this year because that will be the new board. So just make a note that you do have the calendar invite for the September meeting that'll be coming up, but November and December will be coming up, and those will come out right after our meeting in October when the new board comes on.
Yep, exactly. And then the last thing you'll note is we have discussion of budget priorities tentatively scheduled for the November meeting. Normally that's a March issue because of our historic timing with the dues, but this board in the spring recommended moving the dues up in the calendar or up in the fiscal year. So we are working on updating our policies and procedures accordingly. We'll likely bring that to you to ratify in September so that then we can move everything up into the calendar. So that was Mayor Daines' recommendation in the spring, and that'll be ready for your consideration of the next board meeting.
Great. Thank you. And speaking of the next board, I haven't seen a list. I don't know who all has put their name in, but I'm told that we have more than twice as many applicants to serve on the board as we have even space for. So we'll kind of discuss that, but we truly appreciate people's interest in wanting to be a part of the board and to represent their community on this board and to work at a state level to help advance the work and protect the integrity of the local government responsibilities. So thank you to all of you who are here with us, and we'll see how things go as we move forward and make changes. We're going to turn it to Liam next for our boards and commissions report. Oh, I missed it. You put presidential outreach. That's right. Okay, really quick before we go to Liam, who, by the way, has some exciting news for everyone. We'll let you share that in a second. Just a little update on the outreach. Cam and I have driven all over this great state and had the chance to meet with mayors and some county commissioners and even some school board members from across all areas of the state. We've got Tooele next week.
No, this Thursday.
This third, I don't know when. Soon, sometime soon. We're going out to meet with our friends in Tooele County. But we've had the chance to visit with a lot of mayors around the state, and I appreciate everyone we've had the chance to visit with. The very first one was Davis County, and that was the day, you may recall, the terrible storm, and I had to turn around after 2 hours being on the road and couldn't even get there. So didn't get to do that one, but we will be with the mayors of Davis County in 2 weeks anyway. So looking very forward to that. But it's been a treat to get to meet with people and to really listen. And there have been some common threads, some common concerns, and just so many great people. So appreciate the great work that's being done and the good input that we're receiving from across the state, and appreciate the engagement and the activity from our municipal leaders across the state. Good people working really hard, and we're all facing challenges. You know, they're unique to each community, but there are similar threads all throughout local government in this state, and it's really been a treat for me to get to hear from you directly and to try to understand that better. And of course, Mayor Silvestrini comes on as president in October, and my term will end. But I'll still have the opportunity to represent our organization on the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission for the next few years. So having this information is really helpful. So I just appreciate that. And it's really been a treat. Thanks to everyone who's given us time on your agenda and taken the time to visit with us. It's been good.
Mayor, if I can just say, the feedback that I've gotten from other people, that this is awesome. That, you know, it's unique, it's something different. The league hasn't done this before. And so I appreciate your time doing, because I know that it takes a lot of time. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Not just from us, but
well, thank you. It's really been great. And Cameron and I have seen lots of beautiful places in this state. We both love the beautiful different places in the state. It's been a treat to see them and to get to visit with so many of you and see your communities. Go visit with you there in person and visit the city halls and stop by and really understand what's taking place in the municipalities across the state. So thank you for that.
Mayor Ramsey, can I add one piece? Mayor, last week when she and I were driving down to Panguitch for a couple of meetings, we were chatting about the fact that in years past, it would have been very difficult for me personally to have had the bandwidth to spend as much time on the road as I've been able to do this summer because of legislative demands and other things, but because we have more bodies on staff, it facilitates me being able to take off for a day to go meet with members face to face and chat with them because we have enough staff members handling other duties and other responsibilities. So thank you to this board for expanding the staff last year to help us meet that overall mission.
It's absolutely worth it. I can tell you, I even think for the future of the strength of our organization as we continue to work. I mean, we just heard that there's some unique items on an interim committee about
It is what I thought it was.
yeah, discussion on do we need to get stronger direction to municipal governance from the state, you know, those kind of things that we're just always dealing with. Having the chance to go out and to be there and to have Cameron there to get to visit one-on-one, to listen one-on-one and to sit down with our members around the state is really valuable. And they appreciate the work that you're all doing. We always make sure to point out who their representative on the board is, who's representing them. And they always know, we always make sure they know. And to thank all of you for your service. But it is an important part. My eyes have been opened to see that's an important part to keeping the league strong. And I know they appreciate it. So. Yeah, so thank you, and all of you holding down the fort when Cam's on a call with you, but on the road and whatever. Thank you. Okay, Liam, start out with your awesome news, and then you can give your report. That's like a directive, right? Like, I was like, okay, and it's on the agenda. First, Liam has some news, and then he does a report.
Okay, sounds great. Well, the news is being that my wife and I are expecting a little boy at the end of January. That's pretty exciting. Doing stuff like that about myself, so let's just go to the now. Okay, so boards and commissions. I'm talking to you about boards and commissions. So we have two more to fill, both that were created from this last legislative session. The first one being from HB 23, First Responder Mental Health Services. This is creating a grant program that will be administered by the Department of Public Safety of $5 million for mental health resources for first responders. The proposed rulemaking came out at the beginning of August, and we have a membership to appoint on that for that grant committee. And the second one is HB 215, the Project Entity Oversight Committee. We also have an appointment there, and it requires the committee to receive certain information from certain financial and operating information from project entities. And there's more information that I included on the board memo and references in Utah code for all the definitions of what that means. So for our staff recommendation for appointments, we have Paul Bittman, the city manager from Cedar City, to be appointed to the First Responder Mental Health Services Grant Committee, and Gary Hill, the city manager of Bountiful, to the Project Entity Oversight Committee.
All right.
And
Do I need any discussion to that before we ask for a motion to support those staff recommendations? Anybody have any thoughts on?
Well, great guys.
Yeah.
Well,
They'll represent us well too.
Are they willing to do it?
they are.
Yeah, do they know? Are we calling them? Yeah.
I will be truthful in saying that I had it written out as Gary on there, and then I asked Gary.
I asked Gary.
Good. Okay, if there is no discussion, I'll ask if there's a motion to support the board recommendations of the two, city manager from Cedar City and the city attorney from Layton to represent us on these two boards,
The
right?
city manager from Cedar City and city manager from
The
Bountiful.
city manager. Wonderful, sorry. I'm thinking, yeah, you said Gary Hill, didn't you? Yes, you did.
Support it as written.
As written. Gary Hill from Bountiful.
Second.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Gary Crane, yeah. So, yeah, we mean Gary Hill. Yeah. Okay, we have a motion and a second, I believe. And somebody else is keeping track of that, right? Looks like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, our fiscal year 22 year-end budget report and June check register, Nick Jarvis. Nick is joining us online today.
Thank you, Mayor, and apologies for not being there in person. I am quarantined, just wrapping that up, feeling a lot better, had COVID. This is day 6, probably could have been there with the mask sniffling away in a closed room with all of you, but I thought it was better that we didn't do that. So let's get started here. Our year-end budget report. This year, or last year, fiscal year 22, we collected 92.8% of anticipated budget revenue and expended 95.6% of that the budget. That puts us at a negative $92,414 at year end. That is only a quarter of the reserves that we anticipated spending. So we budgeted $360,000 in reserves and only expended a little over $92,000 there. We did collect about 102% of general revenue, which is really what we're looking at when we're talking about dues, registration fees, interest, etc. So we'll go through some of that. You can see in the memo here, we explain what each one of those subsections in revenue and expenditures were. We were right near the top of all of our expenditures in the high 90s. One thing I would like to point out is we were only at about 85% expenditures in administrative costs. So we did our best to keep those costs down, and we'll continue to do so going into the next fiscal year. One thing I would like to point out of what this report is a report on this year's budget, what we actually spent. It is not our financial statements. You'll receive those, the audited financial statements, in December when we go through our audit. There are a number of factors in those that don't appear here that really affect our financial situation. So first is capitalization of things. So you'll see we have an expense here in organization modernization and equipment purchases. According to our policy, we capitalize any expenditures over $2,000. And then the next point is depreciation is also not on here. So all of those capitalized assets will be depreciated. And then the last is the GASB 68 pension liability is typically what it's expressed as, but I've included in here, it's pension liability / asset because last year and I think the year before as well, and this year that we're going to audit here, we actually received a credit in our benefits line. That credit is quite high this year. It's just about $1 million. So that will affect our bottom line positively. And we will have that included in our financial statements. So you'll see that there. So that is how we ended up looking for fiscal year 22. Though it is negative 92,000 about, it's actually more than we anticipated. If we would have expended all of our budgeted revenues with the reserves, we'd be at 360,000. Along with this, we also have our June check register. You'll see that included in your packets. Now, typically, we do this about quarterly, but we did do our Q3 plus report for you in June, and that included all of our checks up until May. So this is only for June. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that, and happy to answer any questions about the particulars on this check register or anything generally on the year-end report.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. Anybody online have anything?
Great. Well, if there are no questions, we would just ask the board to approve this report and the June check register.
Okay. If nobody has any questions or concerns, I'll ask if there is a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 year-end financial report and check register.
Michelle Randall, so moved.
Thank you.
I'll second it, Julie Fulmer.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving fiscal year 22 year-end financial report and check register, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks, Nick. All right, your land, your plan, Public Assets Initiative, Rachel Terry, our Deputy Director, and Meg Ryan, Senior Land Use Manager.
Your land use plan is made possible through a grant from IHC and then in partnership with Zions. So IHC has already given us $500,000. And the goal is to help our municipalities better utilize their public assets. So real estate that's not being fully utilized as it could be. In some cases, municipalities may not even realize they own, in many cases rather, that they own certain property because of the way it's being held throughout the city. And so the goal of that is the goal of IHC and Zions in partnering to provide this opportunity is to help cities identify what they have and figure out a way to use it as part of their other objectives. And IHC is interested in it to help cities use it to towns, municipalities use it for to improve health outcomes. So it can be used in a variety of ways. And Meg can talk about that more. Meg's our subject matter expert, and I'm kind of helping add the structure to how we roll it out. So with the help of IHC and Zions and also WFRC has been a partner in this as well, what we're going to do is create an educational program. And Zions reminded me, don't call it training, this is education. So the education component is going to be 3 parts. The first is, and we think of this too, and I try to think of this in sort of a municipal, well, what do they call it? Municipal university structure, right? There's the education component and then there's the fellowship component. So the education part, there's 3 objectives. First, we help municipalities understand why they should care. Like, what does this mean to them? Why should they do it? Why should they look at it? How does it fit into their overall objectives? The second part is teaching them how to find the stuff. Like, what is in their city that is not being utilized effectively? And that's actually a pretty complicated part because there's GIS and there's mapping and there's all these complicated parts that also have a policy consideration that we're looking at. And then the third part is, okay, you know why it's important. You found your stuff. What are you going to do about it? And then that part is, all right, you got it. How do you utilize it? How do you leverage other things within your municipality? And how do you leverage it with publicly owned assets, through a county or IHC? And how do you bring those together? And once that's the education component, and the other part would be like a fellowship, where you actually workshop specific pieces of property in your municipality, where you actually get to talk to someone who's an expert. And this isn't just us providing the training. With this funding, we're able to bring in experts who this is what they do all the time. They provide the education component, they provide the logistical and technical support. We are not the technical support providers, but our experts will be able to help them workshop through it. What we want to do is make sure we get appropriate buy-in from our mayors and our city councils, so they understand this isn't just like the usual land use training of, that you would provide to a planning commission or even mayors and city council. This isn't the same thing that we provide in other contexts. This is special. This is, we have money, we're going to make it awesome, this is going to be exciting, and then they can hopefully at the end of the training do something with it, that there's an action component to it. And that's why we're using the money to bring in experts. We already have the money from IHC. Zion has committed more money to it for when we get to this part. So the partner we're looking at for the education component is Urban 3. And then also there's Chuck Marone who will be at the conference in October, convention in October. Yeah, that's the right name, isn't it? I'm like, okay, what are these? I keep getting him. So Joe Menicosi is Urban 3, Chuck Marone is his own thing. So we could use his expertise in trying to, in the rural and smaller towns, to help them as they figure out what to do with their public assets. In terms of buy-in, what we want is that we want commitments that people who go to these, go to all of them, unless they're already experts in this. And even still, I think there's a lot of value in people who think they're experts going to things being provided by experts. And this is not just like, let's talk about how fun public assets are. This is like, this is how it fits into your mission and how you utilize it. Because we'd like to have the mayors get the buy-in and have the right people attending. This is not just, you're free on a Tuesday, you go to it and report back. Like, this is supposed to be, you learn about it so that you can execute what you've learned on in the fellowship part. So we'll be providing that information soon. And then the timelines for this are going to be September 6th, we have a webinar, a lunch with the league that we now have, which is twice a month. Let's put that plug in. It's twice a month, first and third Tuesday for an hour, lots of different topics. That there'll be IHC, Zion's, us, hopefully Urban 3 will be presenting on this. Like, this is sort of a preview of what's to come. Then at the conference, Scott Anderson from Zion, and we don't know who's coming from IHC, but a senior person from IHC will be coming. They will be at the general session, and they'll be saying, we're excited about this, get on board, we're giving you lots of money for it. And then at that point, the registration opens so that we actually get people excited and committed. But then there'll also be a part where I still don't think that'll be enough to help people to get buy-in and excited. That will then provide information to you so you can get your communities to understand who should be there and how it will benefit them. Because we want them to understand, especially we have money, please show up. This is a big deal because it's not just training. This is education plus support in the execution. And that's Yolanda Lynn.
So I love this idea. I love the fellowship idea. I love the education component. I just had a question. The 500,000, is there a time limit on when it needs to be spent?
Yes, 2 years.
2 years. So 2 years from September 6th
2 years
From
from January 1 of this year.
Okay, perfect. And then is the.
Oh, I said January, it's July 1. They gave us our fiscal year. So they
Okay.
got it back in January, but they gave us a little more time. So it's fiscal year to fiscal year. So it's from July. So it's up 2 years.
Yeah, perfect. And then, is this geared, I mean, I can tell you, I know every square inch in Provo because we argue over it all the time with developers. Is this geared towards smaller communities that don't have the resources to keep their eyes on all their properties, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would say it's geared to everyone.
To everyone, okay.
The feedback, especially Shalene Gee, is she's like, you'd be surprised if people think they know it, what they don't know.
Okay,
And so she felt like this is not just a rural community thing. This is everyone. I think Ogden recently did a big project, right? Doing public assets inventorying and trying to figure out how it fits into theirs. Was it Salt Lake who did that as well?
We've done it.
Yeah, and so and you did that, right? Yeah, and so it's being able to also use Ogden, Salt Lake experience in going through the process to say, even if you know what you have, here are some ideas as to how you better integrate it to your overall goals. And then there's this health component. Like, can you connect pieces that make your community healthier, more walkable, whatever? And so this is not just for our small communities, it's for everyone.
on what day of the convention will these meetings be, and will they be the
Thursday.
mornings?
It's the lunch session, and I'm pretty sure that's
Also, it's just
Thursday.
October
Yeah.
6th.
Yeah.
perfect.
Can you just describe why IHC and Zions are excited to give us money?
That's a great
I
question.
think that's a lot of money, right?
It's a lot of, and that is
And we
why,
also did the same for WFRC.
Right.
So it's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money. They gave 500,000 to us, and they gave 500,000 to WFRC. The WFRC, that's still, how that's going to shape up is still being sorted out, because there had been some thought of using that money to actually create an inventory, like top to bottom, statewide, here's all the public assets. There are some policy considerations for doing that, like, basically you then hand people you don't want to hand a menu to, like, here's a menu, would you like to now negotiate with cities and use that against them? And we don't want that, so we're trying to think through as partners with WFRC and Zions and IHC, what that piece looks like, because it's actually pretty complicated and there's a lot of policy implications for it, so that's been sorted out. But the reason why IHC gave us so much money is, for them, they use the phrase social determinants of health, which is a nice smushy practitioner word for how do you make the systems in your community provide better healthy outcomes. And that could be more parks, could be connected trails, it could be even used, like, if you happen to have a bunch of parcels that could be matched with other parcels to put different kinds of housing. Like, there are lots of ways you can use it, but their objective was, how do you make it a healthier community by using bassetary cap? And in some cases, it might just mean you sell it off, you use the money for a program you want to use it for. It could be matching it with other things. In Zion, this is a big project, and this is a priority for Scott Anderson and for Shalene Gee. That's why Shalene's there. Hired another staff person named Valerie to just work on this kind of work. And it's not just about municipalities, it's also, they want our school districts to be doing the same thing, because they own a lot of land, and there's a sense, Cameron could speak better to this, there's a sense that if we don't do it at the municipality and school district level, then the state's going to tell all the municipalities to go figure it out. You must do this inventory and potentially take away their discretion into how to utilize these public assets. And so we want to make sure we're saying, we don't need you. We got to figure it out, regardless of the size of the community. We know what assets we have. We have figured out how to, look at these and incorporate them into our general plans and our objectives and making healthier communities. And so there's obviously, like, there's a political component to it. There's a health component to it. And then Zions does, public financing, so they have their own business interests as well. But they've been more than just financial support. Shalene is really the one who is driving this initiative to really evaluate public assets and getting public entities to better utilize them.
Can I jump in as well?
Yeah.
I want to emphasize a couple of things that Rachel just said, because it's helpful as we put these pieces together. Several years ago, Joe Minicozy came and spoke at the league conference. That was pre-pandemic, so it might as well have been a decade ago. But Joe came and Zions Bank helped pay for Joe to come speak. And Shalene and Joe Minicozy presented to the board that week. Now, the main takeaway, the league board, you actually did a motion that board meeting for league staff to pursue opportunities on partnerships on public assets. But one of the biggest directions they gave us was to make it as user-friendly as possible for cities. Well, then the pandemic hit, so everything got complicated. But we have fought off legislative mandates for the last few years, which would have required cities and counties and school districts in the state of Utah to get rid of surplus property and to sell it for a particular outcome. And we have successfully fought those off because we've said public assets and public real estate look different in different communities. Different communities are going to have different needs for what those look like. And there's really not any sort of template to help cities, school districts, et cetera, know how to best maximize these assets. So this partnership hopefully helps lay that foundation for Provo and Clearfield and Granite School District and Wasatch County to figure out what they ought to do with those public assets, how to plan for them, what policies to accomplish. For example, one of the big policy objectives that Scott Anderson has relayed to us is he'd like to see some of these public assets get developed into affordable housing, because if it's not privately owned land, that should bring down the cost of housing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every acre of public assets should be turned into housing, nor does it mean that a city should sell the land. It could be that the city enters into a public-private partnership to develop the land, but the city retains the ownership of the land. So there are multiple different ways to accomplish it. But there is the political piece that we know there's going to be another bill this year, but we feel like now is our chance to control our destiny on that bill, partner with partner with Intermountain and with Zions for this template of how to make it work and accomplish what the board directed us to do several years ago, pre-pandemic.
Cam, we have a hand up online.
Just a second.
Councilmember Winch.
Yep, just 1 second. Mary, go ahead.
I had a question. So in Riverton, I'm curious if this is the type of thing you're looking for. We're going to be building a big water storage area, and currently on the maps, it looks like a rectangle with, a fence around it. And it's in my district, and I've been proposing, I would love to make this an asset with, a path and trees and beautiful, where people would want to come and fish and spend time and things like that. And so would it be like a staff member that we would encourage to attendees and help come up with a plan? And then there's additional potential funding available. Is that what we're looking for?
We're looking for whoever in your city is a person who's your land use person. But at least in terms of the first first course, we would like electives there too, because we want them to see the vision of what this could be and why it matters. And even on the third course, where it's like, okay, you found your stuff, how do you integrate it with the objective you already have, and how does it fit? How do you make these pieces work? The second one is going to be more technical, instead of that, like a city council person or the mayor. That may not be the right fit for them. You probably need to be a planner, or maybe you're a city manager. And it's not just one person. If you have the bandwidth and you want to send more than one person, there's space for that.
Okay.
But we want, at least for that first one, where we lay out the vision, we want electives there too, because there are the decision makers. And then for the more technical courses, whoever's doing the work in that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then even when we get to the fellowship part, it'll probably be, someone, an elected plus the land use person, whether that's your city manager, whether the community's using the city manager for that or a planner, they come and you workshop specific pieces of property. We are not with this money granting it out to municipalities at this point and saying, here's some money to do your project. WFRC is thinking through that and how that'll work out. And there's additional funding that Zions has committed, but hasn't really earmarked it for a particular way, for a particular project. And so we're just trying to help people. Okay, this is how it works. This is why you should care. This is how you do it practically. This is how you would think through this in terms of other objectives. And then you get to fellowship where you can kind of talk through specific pieces of property in your plan. And then also we'll educate those who are there, like, hey, Zions has this, this funding here that you can use in this way to leverage here and here and here. And IHC, but they told us on the call that, and IHC owns all this property, and like we want city to think about like using it. And I thought, okay, that sounds great. We'll take it. You want to give us money and land and support and services? Great.
It just sounds too good to be true.
I know.
Right.
I'm always like,
I'm afraid the last number of years has made me ever so slightly cynical. There's part of me that goes,
you should always say.
we know exactly what land we have in our city, and we're really deliberate about what we're either holding on to it for. And I know our school district knows too. They just gave the mayors last week a map of every land holding they have in the district and said, do we have these in a good place? Are these in the right place? Are these where we're going to need to grow? So I'm like, anyway, curious about this. I think I'm underinformed as to how many municipalities maybe don't know all of the land holdings that they have. I didn't realize that was even a thing, to be honest. I didn't realize that, but it's going to be a thing to varying degrees, and there's probably a huge swing in those varying degrees. And so
my understanding is with Zions, just in general, that they have too much money on hand and need to give it out. So this might be an
I will
opportunity.
back my car up and I need it in Provo.
This might be an opportunity for them to find projects to lend to. I mean, I assume there's the angle there, right? But if they're giving the best interest rate and all that good stuff right now, then no harm in that. But obviously there's going to be, this isn't all altruism. Nobody, but still there might be some great opportunity there.
I've got so many thoughts about this. Yeah. Mary, let's go to Mary and then Carrie.
I understand that the real emphasis is on land use for this, but I just wondered what the coordination is with Alicia DeCura and the Get Healthy Utah programs, because it seems like there's maybe a little overlap.
And Nick, you could speak to that.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm a board member with Get Healthy Utah, and we've had some discussions with them. Where we've seen their role in this is helping with the education piece and really bringing that social determinants of health piece to the city folks, both elected and staff, of kind of doing a training on that. What does it mean? What are the definitions and what can you do? As far as what they offer in terms of designation or the mini grants that they've also been doing, there isn't a ton of overlap there. This is more focused on the land use portion and public assets and what you can do with it, but they are experts in that field. And also some folks from Intermountain would come in and talk to everyone, kind of do that 101 training on the social determinants of health, how the built and planned environment in a city affects your residents' health. So that's where we kind of see the connection there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Carrie Malkovich.
Yes, thanks. I was just wondering from our city to participate, is there a registration and how?
Carrie, you're cutting in and out a little bit. It sounds like you're wondering how to sign up for it.
Yes.
Okay.
So the registration will come, it'll open up at our
At the conference. Yeah.
And just to kind of talk about, like, there are school districts and municipalities that know every square inch that they own. There are lots that don't. But this is still for those municipalities because it's not just, oh, well, I already know what I own. It's how do you integrate these concepts with this land and what are options and how do you make these pieces fit? So it's trying to really help the electeds and our planners, like, think bigger thoughts about how to integrate these objectives and utilizing the land they have, understanding how this piece of property over here with the county or even IHC, like, what can you do with it that might further some of the objectives each community has, and tailoring it to that, because each one's going to be a different sophistication level. But I still think it applies to every community across the state because it's, let's think bigger, and someone else is paying to have experts come. That's why this is not the same as our usual training. Is like someone's paying to have people who, like, this is all they do, come in and talk to us about it, provide that education and support piece that most communities couldn't otherwise afford.
I get that, and I can appreciate that.
Can I have a follow-up question? The September 6th meeting then, which is before the convention, who attends that meeting on the 6th?
Everyone. It's our webinar that is going to be like, hey, this really exciting thing's coming. Let us help you introduce. We're going to introduce you to the structure, because on October 6th, it's more of, a 5-minute, we're excited about this, get on board, go sign up. Like, that's not going to be a very long period. So the September 6th is, here's the structure we're working on. This is our anticipated rollout. Here's why you should care about it. And it's just an hour-long webinar to introduce people to the structure of the program. And then October 6th is, Scott Anderson and IHC saying, we're excited, we gave you lots of money, yay. And then people sign up.
Connie's example is really awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
and how that can work. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments about this? Awesome. Okay, thank you. September 6th. Online, be there or be square.
Right.
Okay.
Lunch with the League. We're all about alliteration in all of our programs.
Love it.
Lunch with the League. Lunch with the League.
Good. Okay, item 6 on our agenda, advocacy and engagement update. We've got a lot going on. There's a lot going on. I'm going to turn to Cam to start, but you take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary. In a second, because we're going to do the property tax piece first. So you can just click on the property tax link. Here's what we hope to accomplish over the next hour, and it dovetails into what also will happen at LPC today. So I'm going to take 30 seconds just to lay it out. There are a ton of moving pieces within the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. After we have a couple of discussion items, we'll do a quick update there, but we're really going to spend most of the time at LPC today saying, here are all the moving pieces there. There are not any concrete proposals yet at the UEOC, but their timeline will have proposals for Mayor Ramsey to consider at the end of September. As a result, we are going to do like we did last year and send what we refer to as our LPC outcomes survey to board members and LPC members. Last year, we had over 100 responses to this survey. There were over 40 policy outcomes there. We presented those to you in the spring when we gave you the report card of how we did. We'll be doing that again later this month. So the goal of LPC today is to here are all these moving pieces, ask your questions, make sure people are aware of what these pieces are, then we'll send the survey realistically next week, because we have a few meetings this week at interim that we want to use to inform that survey. What we hope to do during the board meeting today is have policy discussions around the next steps after the data collection on House Bill 462, and also talk about a couple of time-sensitive pieces on homelessness, including the potential for a September special session on homelessness. So before we get to those pieces, let me also add that our LPC and board meetings were scheduled for the same day on September 19th. But because the Commission on Housing Affordability is planning to review recommendations on September 13th, we made the call last week to move LPC from the 19th to the 12th so we can check in with LPC before that CHA meeting. But we would still have the board meeting on the 19th. So Mayor Ramsey, the board meeting is scheduled for the morning of the 19th because there's going to be a back-to-back. But if the board so desires, we could move the board meeting to the lunch hour on the 19th, which would have been the LPC lunch hour. So that's up to you. We'll come back at the end of the meeting on the scheduling piece, but you can check your calendars to see if people would prefer to move the board meeting from 9:30 a.m. on the 19th to lunch on the 19th. But that would be the checkpoint for Mayor Ramsey to get feedback from the board before she sits down as part of the UEOC on September 28th. There's a slide that walks through all that, but that gives you the overview of how all these dates fit together. So before we jump into those policy questions, Molly, will you take just a couple minutes to recap what we learned on truth and taxation? And then Carson, you can take a minute to reference the short-term rental resolution that the LPC will initially consider. And we'll do those two in a couple of minutes, and then we'll jump to those policy questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to try to kind of get ahead of any potential, just understand what was going on with property tax and be able to kind of understand the landscape before anyone started coming at cities. So this year, 94 taxing entities went through truth and taxation to increase their property tax revenue. A little more than half of those, 54%, were cities. We surveyed them and remarkably got a 92% response rate, which is not common for us, so that was exciting. Of those, we found a lot of reasons for why folks were going through property tax rate adjustments, as well as different rationale for why, and as we see often with truth and taxation, kind of the different approaches that different municipalities take. So there were cities like Mayor, if I may, like Provo, who were going through a pretty small incremental change because they just slowly adjust their property tax rate to meet their budget needs over
I
time.
just wanted to be swept under the carpet behind the school district's huge. The one that everyone's so mad about. But you're so happy to let them to the school district.
Intervention districts are getting a lot of use. And then we had others who don't go through truth and taxation often, and so they're going through a pretty big cash out because they haven't gone through truth and tax for 15 years. Some of them have no truth and taxation on their books whatsoever. So within that, we kind of see different tactics for why they were going through. But largely, public safety, by and large, number one reason why people are increasing compensation, trying to bring more folks on board. Following that, non-public safety personnel was another big one, just trying to build out staff, make sure that they're getting paid market rate value. Infrastructure, specifically water infrastructure, was huge. And then the next three all kind of blend, in my mind, kind of coalesce together, but it's inflation, generally balancing the budget, and growth. Some folks explicitly called out growth or inflation, but it was pretty implicit amongst all the answers there. And then a lot of folks are also looking at bonding new buildings, whether that's a new public safety building, community service center, public work facilities buildings, anything like that. So that's kind of what we see with our property tax layout right now. And then, Mayor, as you pointed out, with the school districts and with the conservancy district, really only about 14% of most people, like the average property tax bill, is going to the city. And so that's, I think, helpful to keep in mind as well. And that's all I got.
Mayor, one other thing I'll add is we're already hearing rumbling from legislators who want to make additional adjustments either to truth and taxation or property tax collection in general because of the number of property taxing entities that went through truth and taxation this year, and because of the complication of the increase in housing value and assessments in different counties. So stay tuned for that. So this information was helpful for us. We shared it with several folks in the media, and then we shared it through Friday Facts, and we've been sharing it with legislators. But yeah, I was made aware of a couple potential bills this weekend that would make it even harder to raise or capture additional property tax revenue.
Awesome. Yay. Awesome. Yeah. Hey.
Carson, can you take 1 minute and give an update on short-term rentals?
Yes. So last year, there were 3 bills that all came out around the last week and a half of the session that would have modified the provisions on how municipalities can regulate short-term rental jurisdictions. we kind of, after that, we brought the short-term rental working group back to life. It's made up of elected officials across the state. Mercia, Councilman White, for example, is very involved and active, and other board members involved too. So that group convened, reviewed a resolution that would try to solidify ULCT policy around short-term rentals. We'll talk about this in content to LPC, so I'm just going to review it here. But the goal is that we know there'll be more short-term rental discussion at this coming session. Representative Musselman's convened a working group, Cameron and Sean Hughes, they're both involved. And so yeah, gist of it, we're trying to consolidate our policy objectives. We're trying to make sure we bring all of the issues that municipalities face regarding short-term rentals forward. That includes housing, that includes impact on neighborhoods, and trying to identify all the different ways that the state regulates how, or even takes tools away from you all to be able to enforce your own ordinances, be able to adopt your own ordinances, and kind of provide that balance that your community seeks. So that's my 1 minute overview, and I'm happy to answer questions.
One, Carson, I'll add that this resolution will go before LPC today. Will not be voted on today. It'll go before LPC today to be voted on in September. And then if the LPC ratifies it, then it goes to the full membership in October for ratification at the convention. But it's, as Carson said, it's an effort to consolidate our policy platform around short-term rentals. And then what we have found in the past is when we do resolutions to the membership, it's a very powerful tool with the governor and with legislators when they see the unity within the organization on particular issues. Anything?
The other quick two things I'll add on that is there will be a short-term rental discussion this Wednesday in the subdivision's interim committee. So we don't even have to wait until session for discussions around this. But the governor has also brought up that he is very interested in looking at this issue. So this isn't just something the legislature is looking at. The governor brought this up as a high priority. He wants to look at it as well. So the resolution is timely. Everybody's talking about this, so buckle up. It's going to be a big issue.
So again, procedurally, LPC considers it today. We'll be accepting edits and other things, and then you'll, as LPC members, vote on it in September, and then it will go forward to the convention for the full membership to ratify.
Okay, thank you. 8462.
Yeah, okay, so Carson, rather than do the PowerPoint, actually, just go back to the board packet. So in your packet, if you go down to under the property tax one, yeah, there you go, you see slides. So this is the timeline I laid out before, that the working groups are meeting in July and August, and they will be presenting their finalized items for UEOC consideration in September. So we're still very much in this consideration phase. Justin and I have been in countless UEOC meetings this summer. Molly's been in some, and Carson been in some as well. Mayor Ramsey represents the league on one. Mayor Mendenhall from Spanish Fork represents the league. Mayor Tran represents the league. And there are lots of moving pieces. So yeah, we're not going to go through all of them. That's what the survey will be for. Go down. Last week, the subgroups all presented to the UEOC a progress report. So this was just to put this in. That's the water one. This is from the government efficiency. So again, all of these will be encapsulated in the survey later this month, where we want to focus the next 15 to 20 minutes or so is on Commission on Housing Affordability. Oh, actually, go to the growth one, yeah. Since this one was inadvertently left out of your packet. This is growth and transportation. There are actually 4 subgroups under this subgroup of the UEOC. At some point, if anybody wants, Justin, I can draw a flow chart for you about how all the groups fit together.
So many.
Nobody wants that.
There's so
Yeah, nobody wants to.
a lot.
But the good news here is we think there may actually be an opportunity through this group to enhance transportation funding at both the state and the local levels. Don't ask me any follow-up questions this week. Wait till next week because we have some meetings this week for more details here. But it just gives you a sense of the scope of everything. Again, our focus for the next few minutes is going to be on the housing piece, which the subcommittee co-chairs presented to the UEOC last week.
Cameron, the value capturable point that conveniently has no details as maybe we're mentioning.
Yes.
That's how it appeared on the screen.
Yeah,
yeah.
See,
It is important to point out, that's not how we put it.
There was nothing.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that was not a criticism. That was y'all, not. That's a very, it was just kind of floated out there with not a lot.
Right, and there's been a lot of detail in the behind the scenes discussions, and the detail has shifted depending on the meeting. This value capture has come up in 3 different meetings and has been described 3 different ways. The first time it came up was in mid-July. Even though I was on vacation, I zoomed in for the call, and I'm glad I did, because the original concept was really offensive to not just cities, but to any entity that imposes property tax. And so we pushed back on it fiercely in that meeting. And it was tweaked for the subsequent meeting, and then it was tweaked again in the last meeting. So we have a meeting tomorrow to try to figure out where it's going. Good news, bad news. The good news could be that we take existing value capture tools like a CRA or an HDRZ and say, is there another tool we're missing that provides more state participation when local governments pledge property tax increment in certain areas? That could be a really positive outcome to have that state and local partnership. So if you had, for example, an interchange off I-15, and the state says we're going to dedicate some of the state tax revenue that comes from the growth in tax revenue from that interchange, and we'll rededicate some of that money into that local infrastructure, just like cities are doing with our property tax. That could be a really worthwhile tool that does not exist currently. Conversely, what would be really negative is if there was just a state capture of local property tax revenue, which is what came up in that first meeting that we pushed back.
Originally.
Yeah. In fact, I remember Ramsey and I were texting with each other and
Sitting at the table going, is he saying what I think he's saying?
Yeah.
He cannot be saying, but it sounds like he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I say right now it's still up in the air, and we've got a follow-up meeting on it tomorrow. But that's where we'll use our survey to help get feedback from our members of what would be a worthwhile tool, and then where the lines in the sand need to be on value capture. On the housing side, and Councilmember Bradshaw, anything else you want to bring up there? Okay.
Just I hate value capture because
It was on my radar.
Yeah,
they
sure.
can take it and frame it. So they can, right. It doesn't mean anything, and I hate those tools.
So within the CHA, there are 3 subgroups, again with the subgroups, but this is what Representative Waldron, hold on, just right there is fine. Representative Waldron presented this last week, again, just showing how housing continues to be unaffordable. Now, the good news is that he also presented the data point that we have shared broadly, which is cities have permitted more housing units in the last 3 years than any time in city history. So he shared that, but then
Point.
yeah, he did misquote a number that we pointed out to him afterward. It can't keep going down. This is a concerning number because we've heard from certain folks that they're trying to get away from the housing gap number, which shrunk in July from 56,000 to 31,000. And we pointed that out in Friday Facts, and that'll be part of our materials for legislators this month. You can see now they're shifting to, we need 250,000 more units by 2030 to keep up with population growth. So seeing that number reframes it for an audience to say, oh, this is a bigger crisis, even though we've been shortening the gap over the last few years. So just be aware of that messaging.
Can I add really quickly, Sam, on that, our current trajectory, assuming, which we all know, the market will probably not be quite as bullish in the housing space over the next few years. But if we were to keep up at current permitting levels, we would actually hit that number most likely anyway. So it's kind of just a question of where the market goes and whether, our levers are actually effective in reaching that objective. But I think that's noteworthy.
Well, that's an excellent segue to the 462 data collection. At LPC today, we will have DWS presenting an update on the data collection, timing of the reports, the timing of the database. So make sure, if you can't be at LPC, make sure you have staffers there who can get that information, because the deadline for cities to submit is October 1st, which will be here before we know it. You have 3 subgroups within the CHA. One is the rural group. The second is the below 80% AMI group. And then the third is what has been called the attainable subgroup. This includes I'll just go down to the attainable. The focus here, as it always is, has been on local land use authority. The co-chairs of this group are Chris Gambrillis from Ivory Homes and Tom McDonald, who's an Orem council member. I invited Tom to this board meeting to be part of this discussion. He's out of town this week for last quick gas for vacation before school resumes. So we'll be circling back with him when he returns. But then we also have Danny Wallace, who is the RDA director from Salt Lake City on this subgroup. I attend this subgroup, and Mayor Silvestrini attends the subgroup. Those are the members of the CHA who are part of this subgroup. Now you'll see that the areas that have been discussed, strategies to allow a variety of housing types, removing barriers, funding opportunities, which dovetails with the other UEOC pieces, short-term rentals, which we've been driving, and then that item that they reframed as enhancing disincentives to not have way too many negatives in that sentence. But you get, this does come back to 462. So knowing that the critical component of all of this is the data collection, and that the data collection deadline is October 1 with reports going in December, we thought now was a good time to talk about our potential next steps before any city's names are attached to the data. All right, so I didn't pick on Cameron City in the board agenda, just use city.
I did notice
citywide.
that.
Yeah.
Cameron City's probably tired. He's such a bad actor.
Exactly. So now you can switch to that PowerPoint slide. So the question for us, I'm just go down to the 4 because I summarized everything, is there something beyond the status quo on 462 that we ought to consider? The status quo, as a reminder from 462, is if South Jordan City, which has a transit stop, has to have 5 menu items to comply with 462 and therefore qualify for state infrastructure investment dollars. If you have 6 menu items or more, then you qualify for higher prioritization. If you are Mapleton City and you don't have transit, you have to meet that 3 as the minimum. But if you do 5, then you get higher prioritization. So that is the status quo. So we've listed 3 potential options that have come up in the discussions. We want your direction of if any of these are worth pursuing. Option number 1 is doubling down on the status quo. So if South Jordan City or Mapleton City are compliant with 462, you would access other state dollars. For example, within the UEOC, we're talking about major changes to the state infrastructure bank. So you could see a connection here where you say a city has to be compliant with 462 to be eligible to access the state infrastructure bank. It's state money that's being spent in your community. So that's the consistency with the status quo. Or it could also be that higher prioritization. So a city that's doing more on the ground qualifies for more potential state dollars. Likewise, the ARPA local match is another example. So that's option 1. Option 2, this is the one that the Property Rights Coalition has brought up every year of my adult life and continues to bring up. And that is withholding gas tax revenues from cities that are not compliant with 462. That would be money that currently you control as cities. So that would be a step beyond the status quo, which is state-controlled money that gets spent in your cities. This would be money that you receive from the state, but you as cities control. We've historically drawn a line in the sand there. Option 3 is 462 compliance would then qualify the city for potentially new tools. So tools that don't currently exist or revenues that don't currently exist. For example, we have been able to get the transportation utility fee on the list of consideration for the UEOC. Now, I recognize, because we see that several cities have the transportation utility fee, but it's all up in the air right now because of the litigation. So conceivably, you could see a scenario where you say a city could do some sort of new revenue stream like a transportation utility fee, but only if that city is compliant with 462. So it becomes more of an incentive for that compliance, and you would still be controlling it as opposed to losing something you currently receive. I'll get to the last 3 bullet points in a second, but options 1, 2, 3, what are your thoughts as a board about these particular options? Recognizing that when the data comes back, you're going to have names attached to cities, and that's what we thought it'd be better to have this conversation now before we say this city is compliant, this city is not.
from our perspective in the past, how many cities are not compliant? I mean, this isn't a hard thing to do. So how many are not compliant? I understand now we'll survey and we'll get, since the initial rollout, how many have not continued to be compliant? But from our initial rollout, how many weren't?
So, Mayor Ramsey, within that first year, 76 of the 82 were compliant. Then that number has slipped a little bit because cities missed the deadlines, but it was flexible. What 462 did is it actually changed a third of the menu items, and the implementation requirements were added. So it's no longer good enough for Cameron City to say, we're going to consider doing X. Now you actually have to show your implementation, which we think will mean that you'll have some cities year in and year out who won't be in compliance because they won't have that implementation component.
So most cities have been, but the truth of it is, when this data comes out, they won't all be. So trying to determine what we collectively as a group think is the right approach for cities who fall into the different categories before we know what cities fall into those different categories is probably the best way for us.
I'm more interested in carrots than sticks in general, but I'm particularly concerned about other concerns.
Yeah. So I'll come back to that one in a second.
It does seem odd when they're, option one is like a great carrot, but then option three is like new control.
Ooh, it's shiny.
Yeah, we'll tell you what they are. You can control them, but we've told you what they are.
Well, and if option one is, if that pool or the programs are big enough, then there's some incentive. And I mean, it's got to be, you can't say, hey, there's some other money available or some other things, but well, it's $5,000 and here's your incentive to do
And you have
this.
$1 billion worth of applications.
Yes, and there's no incentive for you. If there's not enough juice in that orange, then it's not worth taking a bite out of it. And yet you've got a whole group of cities out there that do just look at this and give the proverbial bird and I mean, it's like up here, we'll do whatever we want. And I worry that the only way that you accomplish what you're doing is the stick. And we have shied away from that for the longest time and said, oh, let's just incentivize them. Well, TTIP funds are great if you have a transit project or need the transit project. And I can look at Clearfield Station as an example. We don't need the TTIP funds. For us to comply and say, well, we want this for TTIP does us no good. We did it because it was the right thing to do, not because there was money involved. But when you've got others that say, no.
It just seems like 1 and 3 can be combined in some way. It's so like nebulous on whatever 3, like I don't even know what that is, but with 2, it feels like one of those situations like you punish the masses for a couple of people giving you the bird or a couple of days. So, I mean, I wouldn't even parent like that, but so I don't know. I'm always more for trying to care, especially if we already know the majority are going to follow the rules anyway.
Looks like Councilmember Malkovich has a hand up.
Carrie Malkovich, go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to say 462.
Oh, shoot, Carrie, we can't hear you.
Size of city or class of session. So sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
At all?
Yep, there you are.
All right. So I'm sorry. I'm on vacation as well, so I'm kind of remote. Size of city, HB 462 is based on size of city or class of city. And I was wondering if there was any discussion on changing that so that more cities have to comply.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, Councilmember Malkovich, I've got that as the third bullet point. You may not be able to see it, but it says concern about ability of small cities to comply and the equity issues between cities of plus or minus 5,000, because that was the cutoff for SB 34 several years ago. It was 5,000 in the urban areas. And this has actually caused a major issue up in Cache Valley that you have quite a few cities that are in the urban growth area, but are less than 5,000 people. So they don't have to comply with 34 and 462, but their neighbor across the street does. And that's a real issue that has caused some consternation up there. Weaver County is another one where you've got several small cities below 5,000 that are down the road from Ogden. Utah County, I mean, South Utah County, same way. You've got quite a few small communities in South Utah County that are stone's throw from Spanish Fork, that Spanish Fork complies, but they don't. But it's also trying to figure out the staffing bandwidth and the ability of a city to proactively plan this way, and that's hard for smaller communities to do. So we're trying to address that with the roving city manager concept that has gotten some good support, but that's a real issue.
That's why I was asking it, because where we're at, we're a smaller city and we can't, comply at this point, but I'm just wondering if there's going to be something going forward to help smaller cities, because their neighbors are complying. The other aspect is that we are in favor of that roaming city manager, and I would like to be in on some of those discussions to help that go forward.
I just have a question, and I don't even know how to ask the question, but I'm a carrot versus a stick kind of person as well. Although option 2, I'm trying to think through it. We had a lot of mayors that were voted out because they ran on a growth platform. And part of, they were trying to do the right thing. And I'm wondering if even like something like option 2 actually gives them more cover from in a political running side. And I'm just thinking through that. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment of, does that help with cover a little bit from the mayors that maybe got voted out, or
to be able to say, if we don't do this,
we won't do this, we won't get our part of it.
It's a slippery slope though.
I agree. I was just trying to think through it, but I was trying to just get it out there to see if there was.
Cover's always handy, but I can't tell you there were times when I'm up at the state capitol that I pulled aside and suggested, wouldn't you like me to take away XYZ city authority and just tell you what to do so that you can have the cover because you don't have the political fortitude to do it. And I'm certain this is a conversation that the league staff has all the times, but I think you have to be careful on accepting one level of cover that it doesn't become a very slippery slope of all municipal authorities and loss of that level for the closest to people.
Mark, go ahead and then Kim.
Yeah, well, actually, Todd, I'm going to put you on notice to talk about the political cover concept within the binding general plans and eliminating zoning, because it's the same argument we're hearing. So just be on notice to reference them.
I guess I just don't see it as political cover. Sometimes it's when you've got 7 kids as I do, and you give them all an instruction, and 6 of them do exactly what you told them to do, and the other one just says no. To go to the 6 and say, okay, you're already doing it, but if you do it, I'll give you some other stuff. I'll take you out for ice cream if you do this, but we're already doing it, which means number 7 doesn't care about the ice cream because he knew all along there might be something and he just doesn't care. So at some point, we have to look at what is the incentive to get them to do it. And if there is no incentive to get them to do it, if they've just got cities that'll just say no matter what, because I ran on the growth platform, or I'm not doing it, they don't need cover. And yet cities are cities. And the problem is we're trying to tell cities, you have to do something. And the law itself is flawed, was from the very beginning, because to tell a city they have to grow a certain way is wrong. Ogden City's Ogden City, and they have their own personality, and they're not Clearfield. But we're 2 totally different cities, and so to say, well, you all have to do this equally. So my answer to that is, what appeases the legislature to say yes, we're doing it, and yes, throw us out some more some more carrots, but they're still not getting.
So far, I don't see anything that appeases the legislature and convinces them we're doing anything, like every year. Honestly.
And I think they're
I don't
gonna
even
keep
mean
coming
that
back at it,
facetious.
but
I'm
that's-
serious. I don't know what.
No, and they'll keep coming back at it.
That to a degree of clarity, where the data is what the data is. We closed the gap by 25,000 units in the last 3 years, so now we're going to change how we frame the housing crisis.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Please, would you like to talk now?
It looks like.
Address that now, please.
Let's do Todd.
Oh, I didn't see Mayor Tran. Okay, I'm going to actually ask Mayor Tran really quick for her input. Okay, please.
Oh, hi. I just had a question. I was in a planning commission meeting and someone said, how does Kaysville, being 10 square miles, know when we've done our part? And they were asking for some data as far as we have approved some projects, we have approved some housing that's more dense than we're used to. And I'm just wondering, so we asked our community development director and she said, look, I don't have the data because the metrics that the state uses are so confusing and kind of cumbersome in order to really be able to get good data as far as what is Kaysville City specific doing to meet it and how close are we to the 15% that we're all trying to hit. So I was just wondering, is that something just internally as a city we're supposed to be tracking, or is this something that the state's tracking and we could look to them for some information and some feedback in terms of how are we doing? Clearfield's more than doing their part, it looks like. Clearfield's bigger than Kaysville, so I don't know.
We are not. We're the same size, sister. You may have just passed us in size, so.
Well, you're doing a good job, Clearfield.
That's a really good question, though. We even talked about this in the car the other day. What does doing your part look like? We all have our own interpretation of what doing our part looks like, and take that away. Good luck.
Mayor Tran, I'm glad you highlighted that because that is the fundamental underpinning of the House Bill 462 data collection. And that's why we're bringing Christina and Bill, who are overseeing the data collection and the construction of the housing database, to LPC today, so that Melinda and others, Melinda's her community development director, Melinda and others can make sure that DWS hears the concerns from the city level, so that when they build the database, we all have confidence in the metrics that are in it, and therefore the data that's coming out of it. It is the question that Representative Waldrop keeps bringing up in every meeting, including last week, is every community has to do its fair share. He would acknowledge, if he were sitting in this room right now, that he doesn't know what that means because he doesn't know what those metrics ought to be, because he recognizes the data has to drive it, and the data collection to date has been complicated at best and worthless at worst. So we're hopeful that by retooling that in House Bill 462, that'll allow Melinda to answer that question for you, Mayor, and for your planning commission, and therefore helps inform your planning commission when they're considering proposals. That's why today's LPC is critical, to make sure people are asking those questions of DWS.
Thank you for that.
So Todd, can you give an update about the political cover concept and the general plan, the binding general plans and the role of zoning?
Yeah, Cam and I hear whispers all the time, and they're whispers that don't come from our side of the table primarily. But they suggest that developers, property owners hear from political leaders all the time that it wouldn't be so bad if we were forced to do something. Because, our citizenry doesn't accept decisions from us. But if we can say we have to do this, then it's much easier for us. We hear that whisper all the time. How much validity that has, obviously, we don't know. But that kind of notion, I think, is pushing these ideas about general plans being binding and just eliminating zoning altogether. And in their mind, freeing up elected officials from cities and towns. We don't see it that way, but the whispers like that have been prevalent for, what do you think, Cam, 4 years? Mm-hmm. At least. And that's it's a frightening concept at every level from our perspective.
Do they really think they're freeing up cities and towns?
Well, listen, you'll hear anything in favor of what they want to do, right? I mean, any whisper, any suggestion. But I have, in my 25 years of doing this, I have had elected officials say to me, it would be so much easier if we didn't have the discretion in this and they just told us what to do. You know, that.
Last year, Mayor Silvestrini fought hard against that and for real, you know, he was a vocal voice for a lot of, you know.
We need
for
those
everybody.
vocal voices.
We don't need to cover, you know, we don't want your cover. You know.
Yeah. This push to make, you know, general plans binding. Well, people have tried that before and it doesn't produce good land use patterns. It's not a good policy standpoint. But if you tell me my general plan is binding, I'm going to adopt an overall concept document on land use for my city. I'm not going to call it a general plan. And it's, you know, I mean, there's just so many things we talk about and we do. Our structure is good. Our policy is generally good. Obviously, we always have holes, right? But our policy is generally good. And there's a time-tested formula with general plans and zone designations that has worked since the 1930s. And the pushback against that right now in the name of the housing crisis is really powerful. But that idea that it will be so much easier for local electeds if we just take away your discretion, to me is a sort of a dangerous argument. But I have heard it from elected officials before, not broadly, not, you know, at any high volume. But the whispers that Cam and I are hearing over the last several years are getting louder, not quieter. And some states have tried this, right? Some states have gone this way.
You can see how that's working out. Really.
But the push here won't be result-based from other states. It'll just be, we have to do something because we keep getting turned down for non-changes that are consistent.
Yeah, and perhaps I said the wrong, I was just saying that if we had a stick, then there would be some of those mayors that would be saying, we won't get our Class C revenue. We have to have a plan for growth. And that's, I guess, more of what I was saying, not necessarily a cover, but maybe more of a stick. That's what I'm saying, not tell me where I need to build it,
But I think those two things are folding together on the minds of people who are trying to build houses right now.
Well, they're trying less right now than they were trying. A little shift in the market and now they.
Somehow that will be our fault too.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Yeah, they'll blame that one on us.
Well, Mayor Shepherd, all jokes aside, this is also a key piece of the 462 data collection.
Yeah.
Mayor Ramsey, how many entitled units does South Jordan have for which building permits have not yet been pulled? Ballpark.
Well, Daybreak has more than 10,000 more units entitled, like 11,000 more units entitled just in Daybreak.
Just in Daybreak,
Yeah.
okay. So when we talk about the fact that cities permitted more than 40,000 housing units last year, that does not include one master plan development in Daybreak, let alone all of the other proposals that are out there. To us, that's a critical piece of the 462 data collection, and to the credit of Chris Gambroulis and others, is when we brought this up as part of this working group, they've agreed. They want to know that data as well.
Because it's not unique.
No,
It isn't unique. Riverside has a bunch, Harriman has a bunch.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
But it will also highlight the fact that there are some cities out there that don't have the 10,000 units or aren't planning for redevelopment along State Street in Clearfield, or don't have a master plan for the west side of Provo. And they are the very small minority of cities, but there are still some cities out there, which is why we wanted to ask the question, because before you have names attached to those cities, it's helpful for us as staff to know what our sandbox is to negotiate. So I'm going to try to wrap this up so we can get to the homelessness piece. But what I'm gathering from the group is that option 2 is still toxic. Like, I basically can't remember why. Like, understand the concept. Yeah, understand the concept, but the outcome is still is still toxic. I'd also point out too that it's counterintuitive when residents are already frustrated by growth, but then you withhold money to help with infrastructure to mitigate the negative impacts of growth, right? But I'm also hearing kind of a hesitance, but not an outright no, of looking at options 1 and 3, depending on the details.
Yeah, as long as there's money. One and 3 are great if it's, you know,
There's money to back
if there's money to back it, yeah. I mean, we've defined, when people ask me about housing and what our part is, to me, it's any city's part. It's providing housing at every stage of someone's life, whether that's a first-time home buyer or somebody retiring and downsizing. As long as you get something from here to here, I think you've done your part. That keeps people in your city. Because otherwise, one of those groups leaves your city and goes to Provo and has nowhere else to go because they have to go to Provo because they can't afford to live in Alpine. And they'll go to
Have
Provo.
all the options.
Yeah.
And they're welcome, by the way.
Yeah. Like I said, living in Sunset, I've told the 8 people that are moving in from Kaysville the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That we're thrilled to have you.
So Mayor, I don't think we need a motion because this is a conceptual discussion. I don't want to lock us into the motion.
Right.
But Roger, are you comfortable if we basically have like unofficial direction from the board to keep looking at options 1 and 3 and build out the details?
You can ask for the opinion of the group however you want it. I mean, you're asking for direction, not a position.
So let's actually go ahead and do that, knowing that we have people online who I can't see if they're nodding their heads or not. Maybe we just do a motion of however you want to state it with option
A
1 and 3.
motion to provide direction to consider exploring options 1 and 3.
I'd make that motion.
Motion by Mayor Shepherd. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mayor Kafusi. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of giving staff direction to continue exploring option 1 and 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
And then Mayor Ramsey, I'll consider that motion by excluding option 2, and then Todd gave the concept on general plan that those pieces are still concerning to the board. And I don't think we need a motion about those at this point because we have a policy resolution from 4 years ago that year's board actually proposed to the membership that addresses both of those pieces. We'll reference that at LPC, but it's on our website. And so we'll just continue operating under that policy resolution. But 1 and 3 are a little outside of that policy resolution, so that's helpful direction. Can
I ask a question really quick about make the general plan binding concept? I understand what they're talking about, but I'm thinking about in 2018, we updated our general plan in South Jordan in 10 years. Can you even imagine if we were still functioning on a 15-year-old general plan with the growth that we've had and with everywhere, but it applies everywhere. So is the conversation to make the current general plan binding with no opportunity for flexibility to update that as growth continues to happen? I just can't.
If they had it their way, I think that's exactly where it go.
I don't think that leads to the best outcome at all.
Well, and Todd, isn't part of the idea that part of it's a fear of referendum, and the likelihood of someone doing a referendum on a wide-ranging general plan in their mind is lower than when you do the individual approval of a development. So they're looking for any way to avoid that referendum.
We need to be really cautious. The referendum question is a big deal. It's hard on property owners. It rips communities apart. It's really difficult. But when we start sacrificing good policy to avoid, those kind of outcomes, we make a lot of mistakes.
Okay, so in the next 15 minutes, here's where things are at on homelessness. So Carson, if you go to slide 5. Mayor Walker is unable to join us. He's been the chair of the Salt Lake County Conference of Mayors that has spent the last 5 months trying to implement House Bill 440. And Mayor Silvestrini, as I mentioned, couldn't join us either. His city has agreed to host a temporary overflow facility per House Bill 440 within Salt Lake County. That's the good news. Bad news is that Wayne Niederhauser, who's the homelessness director for the state, his office, OHS, has to approve the COM/COG plan by the end of the month. And their target number for additional homeless beds in Salt Lake County is now at 400. That number has increased over the last few months. If you flex the current shelters, which House Bill 440 contemplates, and have more beds in the Salt Lake and the two Salt Lake shelters and the South Salt Lake shelter, and you add 100 beds from a potential overflow site in Mill Creek, you're still about 150 beds short of that 400 mark. If it's short of the 400 mark, then per 440, Wayne's office would have to reject that COM and COG plan. Now the COG is meeting on Thursday. There's still a lot of moving parts. Wayne's looking at more sites this week. But here's why it really matters to us. If OHS cannot find a site, or excuse me, if the COG-COM plan gets rejected, then the Office of Homeless Services, per 440, can preempt local land use and site an overflow facility somewhere in Salt Lake County. But we negotiated buffers into that bill based on the retail tobacco specialty shop language. And those buffers exclude areas near residential zones, churches, schools, etc. However, when Wayne's team did the map of Salt Lake County, it excluded huge chunks of Salt Lake County. And as of now, he's been unable to find a potential site that's consistent with the buffers. So you can see a scenario here where the county Conference of Mayors was unable to come up with enough beds. And it wasn't, in my mind, they did a phenomenal job. Mayor Walker and his staff should be applauded. If he was here in meeting, I would have him take a bow because he had 2 staffers working on this. They toured a lot of sites. Almost every city in Salt Lake County submitted potential sites, but because of ownership issues or cost or other things, most of those sites were impossible to use. But if we get to the end of the month and OHS needs to cite a location with their preemption authority, but can't find a location, we've heard rumblings that there would be a special session in September to scale back some of those buffers. Now, we as an organization advocated for those buffers, but could be in a situation in September where they're scaling back the buffers in order to locate a site because we as cities were unable to find enough viable alternatives. Now, the bigger conversation, of course, is how do other cities outside of Salt Lake County contribute? And then what are the next steps? So Carson, can you go to the next slide? What are the next steps for House Bill 440, another homeless resource center, permanent overflow facility, the coalition to what's the word? End homeless. I knew it was a very aspirational term. I was going to think what it was. The coalition to end homelessness has stated that their preference is that either another homeless resource center or an overflow facility needs to be in a core city. So a city that either has current facilities or is nearby those cities. So they actually rejected several proposals that came from more suburban cities where you have willing cities like Sandy and Traverse saying, we want to use this site. The coalition said no for a variety of reasons, which then means, okay, if this burden gets piled into those core cities, and what's the role of other cities to help with that, facilitating the development of permanent supportive housing? Is it contributing more to the mitigation fund, potentially changing the formula, et cetera? Now, we have to solve all of those questions in the next few months. But where we as staff want some direction is what happens if after COG this week, the OHS rejects the COG proposal, goes to their preemption power, and then asks the legislature to modify their preemption authority so they can preempt in more places. How do we best respond to that, which could happen before this board meets again? So we've got about 10 minutes for that piece. Can you go back to the previous slide, Carson, so people have that up there?
I can pass along Mayor Walker's thoughts. His team, his city spent 1,000 hours on this. True story. Staff time, it's become their full gig for some of his staff, and he spent a lot of time driving around and looking at the reality. Once the providers said, okay, these might be viable sites, because the site we submitted, the provider said no to it, and it's on I-15, and it's a hotel on I-15, and the provider said, that's not going to work. Okay. Okay, so the providers went through and modified the list up front, and then anything that was possible, they have spent so much time going through, a lot has been weighed. And with the buffers and with taking everything into account, one 100-bed facility that's going to need work to even be up to snuff for that and money is all we could come up with. And it wasn't people, for the most part, people didn't hold out politically. For the most part, most everyone came to the table in good faith. This was just reality. And so Mayor Walker's opinion is that he would like the state to have a little more preemptive control over this, because he said, no city has 1,000 hours to put staff time into trying to find this every single year. And it's not going to look different next year than it did this year. With the requirements of what the service providers need, there are limited places where these can even go, a temporary overflow shelter in the county. And
So they're planning on these popping up every year.
And right now,
And so
currently,
tearing
under
down
Bill 40,
the end of
the Salt Lake
winter.
County Council of Mayors has to propose to the COG a new location every year. And after 5 months of work, this 100-bed location, which still leaves us 300 beds short, is all that could be found. That met the needs, and it doesn't even meet the needs.
I have a question. This is Julie Fulmer. As Troy and as you guys were all working on this, were we looking for options that contained all the housing? And maybe I missed this because being online is a little bit harder, or were you guys looking at smaller locations that could possibly fulfill it? Because not every location, I guess that's my question. Yeah.
I think we were looking at everything. What's the best, most viable option to host a temporary homeless resource shelter in your city, taking into account the metrics of what are needed and how accessible is it and how close to transit or transportation is it? Are there any services in the area? Whatever you have that could meet the criteria that you really believe in good faith, the service providers could use to help provide the service. What is that? And so we had some that were not nearly big enough and some that were big enough, proposed a variety of them. And right up front, the service providers wiped a lot of them right off, including all the hotels that were put forward.
So, Dawn, are you saying like with all of them combined, we didn't have enough space, or just with the sites located, we didn't have enough space?
Just with the sites located, with all of them combined, we would have had well more than enough space, because we have 17 municipalities. I'm like, Alta didn't submit something, I don't think.
Alta and Harriman did not submit.
And Harriman didn't submit anything, but everyone else submitted something, and some of them would have met the full need, and a lot of them would have been close enough to that if there were 2 of them chosen, it would have met the need. But the only one that's been seen as the most viable, even though it still needs work and money put into it to make it work, is the library.
Why? And maybe I missed this too. Why is it that we can't pick two of the locations instead of going into interim?
Because they didn't qualify. They didn't meet the need. The service provider said it's not going to, that doesn't meet the need.
Well, and Mayor Fulmer, Wayne is touring sites this week and is still looking for additional sites, because the Mill Creek site is insufficient on its own. So there could be a second site in addition to the Mill Creek site, or if he finds a site that's big enough, it can be a standalone site. That would be his preference, because the providers are leery about trying to staff 2 overflow facilities rather than just 1 overflow facility. But for example, Taylorsville City submitted a site that's a former 24-hour fitness or former gym, huge facility, lots of space. The footprint of it would have been great, but the property owner did not want to contract with the state for a partial year for overflow, homeless overflow, because you can get a lot more money by contracting with the private sector to fill that space. So that's a lot of it is the retail space is so tight in Salt Lake County, there just aren't a lot of vacancies. And where there were vacancies, you had property owners who were unwilling to participate.
And some that have been sold, there was a church-owned site that was proposed that looked like that might work, but it had already been sold to somebody else, wasn't available anymore, and you can't control that either. Mhm.
So again, coming back to the question, if there's a special session in September that proposes to reduce those buffers, we have negotiated those buffers during the session. What feedback do you have for us about how to approach those buffers? Because that is going to be real if OHS rejects the COG recommendation.
Is there anything in the buffer that's causing a particular problem, like a school or church, or like, because I'd hate to just broaden it if there really is one narrow thing that we can give on.
Based on the maps we've seen so far, it varies based on different areas. And another consideration of this as well is that it's also within 1 mile of an existing shelter. And that was to really make sure that big communities that already have shelters, we aren't doubling down and saying, we're already trying to mitigate this, here's another one. Within that, one that we had discussed during the session is it's residential, it's schools and daycares, but another one is that it's churches, and that there is a very real possibility that a church would be willing to host something like that and would like to be doing that commitment to the community. So that is one. But then again, most of our churches are embedded within residential communities. And so it's kind of, and so it's all of these kind of compounded together. And so right now it's 600 feet within one of these areas. So again, I don't know what directive or sentiment you have towards, is it maybe removing something like churches from that definition? Is it dropping that down? So it's 500, and we haven't seen the maps and played with those buffers to know truly, if you drop it from 600 feet to 500 feet, does that create a tangible difference? If you remove churches, does that make a tangible difference? We haven't seen that.
Is that data that we could kind of bring together or see where we were falling short on their checklist at least, so that we could have a better opportunity to negotiate and only give up what we needed to?
So what gets tricky about this, Mayor Fulmer, is that OHS has been building out a map. We haven't seen it yet, but I hope to see it soon. The tricky thing is, let's say OHS declines the COG recommendation, and let's say they find a facility in Cameron City that would work, but for the buffers. So I could see a scenario where they come to us and say, we're going to reduce the buffers for this particular site so that we can preempt Cameron City to put the facility here. So then it's the broad policy of the buffers, but it's really targeted at one community. So you could then see Cameron City come into the league and saying, we fought for these buffers, stick with these buffers so that we don't get preempted. Even though the reason for the preemption is the fact that the cities, of which this city would be one, were unable to come up with voluntary sites to fit the need. And so it could be that in light of the fact that there's still a lot of unknowns, we wanted to get this on your radar because of the COM meeting last week. It could be that the will of this board is just to say, because Mayor Ramsey's Salt Lake County Mayor and President, and Mayor Silvestrini's first vice president of the league, and his city has already offered to accept one. And maybe the board just gives authority to those two, plus Mayor Walker, who's chair of COM and on the league board. So basically, you're the subgroup of the league board that as these details become available, navigate it with league staff about what our position should be on buffers.
Could we do it by a different? Could we do it by a different metric, Cam? So we're not doing it based on like where they fell short, but maybe we start getting data on why we did them in the first place, like safety measures and how they fall in a ranked category to what those safety measures are.
Yeah, so we borrowed language from the retail tobacco specialty shops because we felt that the policy rationale was the same. You don't want a retail tobacco specialty shop across the street from the school, and it makes sense to not have a permanent overflow facility across the street from the school. So, and Wayne Niederhauser agreed and Representative Ellison agreed with that policy rationale. Nobody had any maps when we were doing this. And so now that maps have come forward, they've said, hey, there's a different public purpose for homeless overflow than there is for a retail tobacco shop that needs to be considered as part of this.
Well, if anything, the challenge with that argument though is it would increase buffers, because there is a preponderance of mental health issues or whatever. It's not like everyone who goes to purchase alcohol, just statistically, the preponderance of mental health issues, of offenders, of convicts, the homeless population will have significantly more than just someone going to buy alcohol, right? So that argument would be contrary to the buffer. So I think Julie's got a great point about what truly are the safety concerns. And yeah, obviously elementary schools or schools, no way. Churches, if we look at the predominant religion, those facilities are used on the regular. They wouldn't be picked up unless there was one that was, being reconstructed and whatever. And so I'm inclined to really look at that as an option. We all know we need to solve this problem. I'm totally willing to compromise, but we need the data to do that. And I think that's the whole point is the safety data is relevant. The real estate research they've already done. If you're spending thousands of hours on it, there's good data there. We just don't see it. So I would support directing whoever staff and members of the board to look at it, since there's a time constraint here, but I think it was Julie's phrase to compromise as little as possible, but a data-driven compromise.
Yeah, good. Two clarifications I think are helpful. One is when I mentioned churches, I think there's two options, right? Of like, maybe it's not, if a church, like the church I grew up in would house a homeless family like every winter. And so maybe it is that there is a local church that wants to take someone in, but also maybe it's just that there's actually a great building next to the church, right? And what is that interface? The second is that based on what we understand the kind of operation of this facility to be and what it has been in the past, is that it is very much you are bused there, you go inside, you sleep, you wake up, and then you are bused back to Salt Lake City. And so as far as the impact that they're foreseeing, it's not necessarily that they're going to be people waiting or loitering around, going out in the neighborhood. It is very much, we are giving you a place to sleep tonight to make sure that you do not freeze to death, and then you are going back. And so,
and part of the reality of that is that most places around Salt Lake County don't even have the services available, which took a lot of places. I mean, we still submitted them, even though that there is a concentration of services and a void of services in a lot.
And so I don't want to be Pollyanna saying, there's going to be no impact, whatever, and it's all going to be hunky-dory, but it is going to be dramatically less in those areas than our existing shelters that are housing people 24/7.
We had one of those in South Jordan.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, we had one, and everyone was brought there to stay, and we had a few people kind of stick around during the day, but it was a very regimented system because we don't really have. I mean, we have transit stops on bus service, and it wasn't anywhere near a track station, and it wasn't near Front Runner. But so I can appreciate what you're saying, and it's not the same as a permanent full-time shelter. Although let's be realistic, wherever this ends up, there is a good chance it could become a permanent full-time shelter because trying to find a place is proving to be really hard.
So, Mayor Ramsey, several of the issues that I have on this slide have come up in the last few minutes that we will be working on between now and January. If the coalition says the only way they can service a facility is if it's basically in or near a core city, then what's the role of South Jordan in helping bear that burden within the county? We can't solve those questions now, but Councilmember Egger did make the motion about empowering the two officers with Mayor Walker. And I'll say, like, working with all the other cities in Salt Lake County, which is, if we have other Salt Lake County reps on the board, but starting with the three of you who've been intimately involved in it, with league staff working with Wayne Niederhauser, trying to figure out what it should look like and have it be I like that term, the data-driven compromise around the safety concerns on the buffers. So you have a motion, but not
There's a
second.
motion on the table to have Mayor Silvestrini and Mayor Walker and myself work with the rest of the mayors in the county and with our staff to Wayne Niederhauser and kind of continue to take that role to help figure out where those compromises are based on data and safety concerns.
That's second.
Hey, Dawn, I have a question. As Utah County starts having their discussions, we're going to be meeting with Representative Judkins. Provo and I have been kind of taking the lead for our communities down here to start driving these discussions, and we're going to be working with Wayne Niederhauser also. I wonder if we should have one of our reps come up as we start kind of having this broader discussion.
Are we at the point of another discussion?
Yeah, so Mayor Fulmer, I think for the buffer piece, that's so Salt Lake County specific right now. But I think for the bigger piece, you're absolutely right of making sure that Utah County is very much part of that conversation.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion on the table. Unless there's any amendments to the motion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Usually I wrap up a vote by saying thank you. I don't know if I'm saying thank you to this one. Okay.
We'll say.
We'll keep working on it.
We'll say thank you.
Trying to get it right. It's a tough thing. And thank you really. Ann and Molly both have spent a lot of time on this, and there's just been an awful lot of time spent on this. It's not easy. Everybody here, I think, Rachel, you probably
So
put in a minute or two on this.
Oh, no, it's all Molly.
You test Molly with solving
All of you,
homelessness.
yeah, I know. I happen to know. I'm like, as I look around the room, I'm like, wait a minute, there's also, okay, Justin, yeah, so I know. Anyway, thank you, Tim.
Molly solving homelessness.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mayor Ramsey, we've got 3 minutes before we need to end here. Here are the key dates. We referenced them before, but obviously today's the 15th. Mayors are invited to the governor's mansion next Monday. So if you make sure your mayor has RSVP to attend that, and then we'll have a Davis County specific meeting with legislative leadership and mayors and league officers on August 29th. With September 12th, we moved LPC to be before the Commission on Housing Affordability, and then we'll have the board meeting on the 19th with, that'll be a week before the UEOC, and then you can see the rest of it there. Do we want to keep the board meeting at 9:30 on the 19th, or would people like to move it a little later in the day? Or would you like us to just make the call and change the calendar invite? Thoughts one way or the other?
Well, I have another meeting at noon that day, but if I need to miss it and we move it to noon, I'll just have to adjust accordingly. I'll make work, whatever. You guys want to keep 9:30 or move it to noon?
Well, so the other thing I'll note is that we are trying to get the officers in front of the editorial boards of the Tribune and Deseret News. We have a placeholder for Monday, September 19th, because we're trying to piggyback it on existing league programming at 1:30. So I guess as I'm looking out for officers, I only have two here, but for Mayor Ramsey and Mayor Kafusi, would 1:30 work on Monday, September 19th for editorial board visit at the Deseret News and KSL? Will you two look at that?
I'll just make it work. I just will not go to my 12 o'clock meeting. It goes from 12 to 2. So I'll just have to miss that. Just make it work. What we all do, right? We all just
Isaac, would that
have to
work?
prioritize and figure it out.
She's out of town on the 19th? Okay. So then we'll circle back with Gary Hill, who's at a funeral today, and that's his unavailable. And we'll follow up with Mayor Caldwell. If the 19th doesn't work for editorial board visits, we'll move it. So for now, let's do this. Let's keep the 19th at 9:30 because that's on people's calendars. And people probably planned around it. So let's just keep that for now, but we'll send out a follow-up email with the materials this week. And then so two other quick things with the executive director report. Number one, I got back, I spent a week with state league directors from around the country. And it's hard to believe I'm now the second longest tenured league director in the West. And I've been director now for almost 5 years. That's still nuts to me, but I am proud to report that we punch above our weight at this league for how small our staff is. The fact that almost every year of my tenure, we've had 100% membership or 99% membership. That's higher than most leagues. Gathered a lot of feedback from other states about their legislative advocacy concerns of being perceived as the League of No. Sounds familiar. So we spent a lot of time swapping notes about how to counter that League of No perception. We spent a lot of time talking about how to connect it with our members and train our members in meaningful ways and make sure there are meaningful networking opportunities for members. Great ideas about how to enhance sponsorship dollars so as to reduce the reliance on dues. All told, I took 29 pages of notes during that week, which I then summarized for the executive staff, and we're working through some potential ideas. One of the things that came up is a lot of leagues have formal partnerships with their affiliate groups. So City Managers Association, Municipal Attorneys Association, et cetera. Our relationship with them is more informal, but we've had a request from the Municipal Attorneys Association, particularly the Statewide Association of Prosecutors, to formalize based in part on their bylaws. So we'd like to propose a pilot program. We need your direction on this. So before we lose a quorum, Rachel had a memo. Can you summarize the memo for 30 seconds, Rachel?
Yeah, they want us to send out their dues to the cities and counties and collect that for them. So it would just be, that's what other organizations would like us to do, is kind of help them with the admin of dues collections and then potentially website support and conference support. But the swap would just be this administrative dues collection for them. So they don't really have staff to do that.
And they would pay.
That was the question. And
We would keep a portion to cover, our work on that. It would not.
Right.
And SWAP is actually having to move from being solely supported by counties to now being supported by counties and cities. So they're actually having to change their model and who they rely on.
Would it be enough to generate some revenue, not just to meet our staff costs for doing it?
I don't know what we haven't really negotiated what percentage of their.
I would be surprised if in the early part that was realistic.
Yeah.
If we can establish sort of a relationship that's ongoing and they can benefit from that, that might become possible. But Salt Lake County's just kind of withdrawn support and funding and help, and so they're in a bad spot. SWAP's in a corner. I think it's going to take a little while to sort of help stabilize that organization. So my hunch is in the early part that wouldn't be realistic, and maybe later on.
And this is why we're proposing it as a pilot, because we've had several other affiliates who've asked about us potentially hosting websites or doing other things. And keep in mind, your cities are already paying dues to a lot of these groups, and then they're spending it elsewhere with sweat equity to try to do it. So I thought maybe there is a role that we can step in and help. It's just a matter of figuring out the details, and we don't want to take on more than we can chew, which is why we're proposing the pilot. One thing Mayor Ramsey mentioned to me last week when we talked about this is if we do send out invoices for membership dues, making sure that that was separate from our due structure, making that very clear to the recipient cities. So that could be part of your motion on the pilot program too, is making sure that distinction is clear.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see if the staff at the league ends up sending out the dues for the Municipal Attorneys Association, I would like to see it say, this is coming from the Municipal Attorneys Association. We're just the contractor sending it out, not say it's coming from the league at all, right? Simply because that creates confusion no matter how hard we try, right?
So we just would welcome a motion to authorize that
pilot program. If you guys feel like you've got the bandwidth to take on the pilot program.
I think we do to try it out. And it would just be 1 year, we help collect. And it will inform whether or not it's something we can take on for any other organizations. And if we decide, no, this is too much instant disaster, then we don't do it again, and we don't do it for anyone else.
And at this point, we don't see a benefit.
If we don't step in and help, swap could collapse.
It will probably.
I think it will collapse.
Yeah.
But this also lets us test it out. So we just need a motion on that before we lose our quorum.
Motion to try out the pilot project.
I second it for 1 year.
I've only got 9 votes. How many do you have?
Well, in the room, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the
Okay, all
room.
right then.
Yep.
Okay.
Nobody leave.
Okay, are we putting a time limit on the pilot program in the motion or no?
I think she said
You said 1 year, right?
Well, I said 1 year, but I like pilot.
I feel like that was implied in my motion.
Okay. For 1 year. Okay, good. All right. Okay, then all in favor of implementing this pilot program to partner with the Municipal Attorneys Association, try to help them out. A block with the Municipal Attorneys
Prosecutors.
Association, whoever, prosecutors, whoever this organization is, who needs our help, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Perfect. And the last thing is the board vacancies are open, or the board process is open. Please submit by the end of the month, and then we'll be looking for volunteers to serve on the nominations committee. So all that info has been in Friday Facts. If your spot is open, you'll see in the memo where we have vacancies. So either apply or nominate someone. We'll be willing to serve on the nominations committee, and watch for more details from Friday Facts.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, unless anybody else has anything urgent to have for us right now, then I will ask for a motion to adjourn and say thank you so much for being here.
Motion. Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Look, this meeting is adjourned. Okay, we
Thanks,
are
everyone. Great
adjourned.
to be
Thank
back.
you. We'll see a lot of you at LCT.
Oh.